Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the podcast, the return of Courtney Marie Andrews. She was on the podcast. Well, actually, before I turned this into a podcast in 2020, I was transcribing all the interviews, and that's when I had her on last. That was in 2018. So this is an updated version, a podcast version. Her latest album is amazing. It is called Valentine. It is out now on 30 Tigers Records. And I have to say, I remember this from the last time we talked. She is a nonstop creator, and I mean that in the best sense possible. She is a published poet, a great poet, of course, an amazing songwriter, and also a visual artist. And this is a slightly out of context quote that she says at the end of the podcast. I forgot what I was asking her, but she said, "I am a taskmaster," and that she is. When we talked back in 2018, we discussed how disciplined she is as a writer and how she would block out certain parts of her day just to write. And that's really difficult for a lot of people to do. Her updated answer to that in 2026 is she still does that. She still blocks out time. And she said, "I love the challenge of writing every day." But when she writes something that she doesn't really like, she puts it down, sets it aside, often for several weeks, and comes back to it. But we didn't talk just about songwriting. We talked a lot about, like I said, her process as a poet, how that intersects with her songwriting. And I love this one quirk. She has to write, and she showed this to me. You obviously can't see it on the podcast. She has to write in green notebooks. At some point, she showed me a giant stack of green journals. They have to be green. And I love that. That's part of being a taskmaster. And of course, she is a voracious reader. We talked about that at the end too. Love this conversation. Again, the latest album by Courtney Marie Andrews is called Valentine. It is out now, and here's my interview with Courtney Marie Andrews. I always like to talk about the ritual of the process. But I want to jump into this looking at your previous interview. And you had said, I think I must have been impressed last time we talked in 2018 by your discipline, because you said that you would block off a chunk of time when you would write, and you'd gather all your notes on tour and then find a dedicated time to write, which that's pretty unique among songwriters. It's funny because if you ask any type of writer outside of a songwriter, like a prose writer or novelist, or they'll say like butt in the seat, write every day. Doesn't matter what it is or how bad it is, you got to write. But songwriters aren't really like that.
Yeah.
So do you still have that discipline of chunking out times to write?
Yeah, definitely. I would actually say probably since the last time we spoke, I went through a really big phase, uh, of doing that last year, like a couple years, including last year. Now I'm in like make album release mode, but last year and the year before, I was extremely dedicated to writing a lot, and I wrote maybe too many songs and now there's a backup of, material. Yeah, I think because also that I have so many art forms, I have to be disciplined in my time, and I get too scattered if I do one thing one day, and then I don't feel like I can get deep enough into whatever art form I'm doing, so I like the challenge and the depth of writing every day for periods of time. Um
So what is that schedule like for you? Is it I think last time we talked, you were an early morning person, which again, very uncool for a songwriter. Eh,
Yeah.
but what is that like for you now?
If left to my own devices, like, in the pandemic, for instance, I am such a morning person. I am a night person I'm a forced night person due to, like, my career, you have to stay up late as a musician, but when I'm home, I prefer to be in bed by, uh, a semi-early hour because it's not like I'm waking up at the crack of dawn, like 6 a.m. I've never been like that, just like a make coffee, start writing around 8, um, that kind of thing.
So do you give yourself parameters? I'm going to write for an hour, going to write a certain number of words. Regardless of what it is that you're writing, I'd love to know even how disciplined you are in that, whether that's a word count or anything like that.
With songs, it's like I like to get the draft of a song, even if it's like a loose draft, like first verse, second first chorus, and if the second verse needs tweaking, I come back. I like songs to be pretty quick, um, and then I edit them later. And actually, I'm like that with poems as well. I really like that first burst of inspiration to be pure and untainted by the editing process because that's a different brain for me. The and so it's when I'm in like a songwriting zone, it has to be, it's not like, oh, it's not done in 3 hours and I'm done. So it's but there definitely reaches a point where with songs especially where you're like, oh, if you've been banging your head against the wall for 4 hours, it's probably best to like close that chapter and come back another time. Um, but yeah, I would say like a couple hours in the morning, just getting the like, hopefully it's the whole song, but if not, then at least it's kind of like the bones of it. So,
So, is there a feeling? What's it when you feel like you're banging your head against the wall? It's not happening. Um, yeah, how do you know? When do you know you've reached that limit of I've got to take a break?
it just sounds forced. I think that there are songs should not sound forced. I think, and it's really obvious when they are. So yeah, when it starts to feel like it's forced, but I like the melody or I like the feeling of the song, the best remedy for me has been putting it down, putting it away, and then actually not listening for a long time, like weeks sometimes. And really in that process, I when I'm writing every day, I don't even listen the next day. I think actually it's important for me to have the like essence put down and then to step away and have perspective. Um, and so time is really a huge one, uh, especially if it's not coming out. And sometimes, you know, like to the credit of a like a novelist or a long form writer who says you should write every day. I do think that there is something to that because you don't become so precious about the last thing that you wrote or the thing you're writing, it becomes like, "Oh, well, I'm writing tomorrow." So, uh and I think that that is, like, the number one thing that can get in people's way is, like, when they're like, "Well, this is the song," and it's like, "Well, tomorrow will be a new idea," and that might spark this sort of, like, beautiful, inspiration that the last song didn't, so
So you wake up. How do you know that it's a poem day or a song day? I'd love to explore
Mm.
that process. Yeah, or how do you know which one you're going to be writing?
I I just go through phases. I sort of, like, circulate through them. So, if it's song time, I've spent a month on songs. I'm not in a poem phase at all. Um, Poems are probably except for the editing time in which I do spend every day for a month or 2 editing, the poems. Poems are something that just come to me while I'm touring. It's really hard to write songs while you're touring. You're like in a van with people, you're at sound check. It's just occasionally there was a tour where I was like writing them at sound check, but then you're like subjecting people to like that vibe, um, which can be difficult depending on the tour and that sort of thing. So poems kind of became my, like, way to be creative on the road. I can do that anywhere. I can, like, open my Moleskine at any point and come up with an idea. And then I get to a point where I, like, go into editing a book, making a collection, and that is, like, an everyday thing, and I'll just be focused on that for, like, a month. So, my and it's the same, I paint as well as a hobby, and I have to paint every day for 3 weeks. Like, it can't just be, "Oh, I'm just gonna get my stuff out and paint for a day." It's like it's the same with poetry and music. It's like I like that, deep chunk of time where I'm dedicated to that one craft.
So if one's not happening, then you don't go to another art form. In other words, like you feel like you're stuck with the songwriting. Do you say, let me work on poetry for a while, or do you just kind of get yourself out of the creation mode altogether?
Yeah, like I said, like, poetry is, like, the only thing in the essence of the process, like, the bones of the process that I don't do all at once like I do with songs or painting. Like, it poems just come to me throughout my life, and then eventually, when I know it's a collection, I'll go into editing phase, and then I'll get into the weeds and do it, like, for a month or something, um, in the editing phase. But, uh, as far as, like, the chunk of time, do I get distracted and move to something else? No, I think I would, like, if I'm not reaching it in a day, I just try again tomorrow. Um, and that happens, and this the way I do my process. Like, there will be a day where the song isn't hitting, it's just not feeling right, but, like I said, like, knowing that I'll write again tomorrow takes the pressure off a bit, and generally, there's always, like, something you can, like, glean from, uh, anything you write, you're like, "Oh, that melody was cool," or "That progression was cool," or "That lyric was cool," and it may not all jive together, but there's something I can take and maybe use it tomorrow or use it for something else, so
When you're a visual artist, are you because I talk to some songwriters who are visual artists as well, and I think they fall into two camps. Those who they use visual art as a way to get away from prose writing or songwriting and deliberately get no ideas when they're painting. There are others who say when they're painting, they get song ideas. So does that ever happen? Or which one of
um,
those happens, I guess?
I think more than that, it's like painting, poetry, and music for me are all ways to tell us the same story through a different perspective. Um,
Hmm.
and I think I used to be afraid that one would take from the other, but actually I found that it's kind of opened my world in, like, possibility. And I think when I was too focused on songwriting or I became obsessed, like I had to write something every day or something, when I was in my early 20s, I think it's like holding on to something too tight. Like, if you hold on to sand too tight, it slips through your hands, that sort of saying. Like, it just, it became not as mysterious. And for me, so much about the creative process is like living in that kind of early state of wonder and mystery. And I feel that the more I can cultivate that, you know, in these art forms, the better. Like, so if I step away from songwriting for a month, it becomes mysterious to me when I come back to it. And I think that's really the place I'm always trying to, like, maintain.
It occurred to me that when you have those three outlets, I can't. I mean, I knock on wood. It seems like it'd be really hard to get any kind of writer's block because there's always going to be a way. It seems like there's an avenue for you to express yourself in one of those three. So it's got to lessen the anxiety, I would imagine, of creating if you know that somehow your voice is going to be heard in one of those three.
Yeah, I as somebody who, like, used to buy into the writer's block thing, I truly just think I think maybe it's, like, inspiration block is more of the word, like, you can always write a song. Will it be your best song? Will you only get one maybe every 30 days? Like, sure, but, you can always finish a piece of work. I think it's more of just people feel uninspired by themselves or the world around them, and so I kind of, like, stopped buying into that. I'm like, you know, the writer's block thing. I think it's a myth or an anxiety that people have. It's let more that than it is. Um, but yeah, this is maybe a way subconsciously to like curb that feeling. I don't like that feeling where I feel like I'm forcing something to be inspired or have a feeling or, you know, and this is definitely a way to do it, and also I don't have the resources to make the amount of albums that I would like to make. Um
I have a great quote for you. I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr about 10 years ago. He wrote the book All the Light We Cannot See,
Oh,
uh,
great.
won the Pulitzer Prize. And I asked him about writer's block, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I don't believe in writer's block." He said, "Writer's block is a failure of courage." It's exactly what you're
Mhm.
saying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. But yeah, I agree, and I used to buy into it, like I was saying, but kind of honestly, in a way, the pandemic, obviously it was awful, but it was just like this time to really dive into my creativity in a way that I hadn't been able to do because I'd been a touring musician since I was a teenager and uh or working a job or just had so many other commitments. And for the first time in my life I was like really able to be just a creative person. And I just realized that, you know, there are so many ways to express your creativity and so much of like the block is just a fear. So,
Well, when I was a professor, I told my students writer's block happens not because you don't know what to say, but because you don't know where to begin.
yeah.
Um, and I know that's a different type of writing, but I think with prose writers, at least, I would tell them, like, don't feel like you have to start at the beginning. The ideas are up there. The goal is how to get them out. But people always think, again, it's different type of writing. They think, I've got to start at the beginning. It's like, no, you start where what's in your mind. And for me, all I need is momentum.
Yeah, momentum is huge. That's once you get that line that fuels the song, it it can be written and so quickly, you know? It's just getting that one thing that just kind of propels you forward.
So I interviewed Paul Muldoon about a month ago. Paul Muldoon is, if you've taken a poetry class in the last 50 years, he's one of the most iconic poets. I mean, he's been hailed as like one of the greatest poets of the last 100 years. He teaches at Princeton. Um, but he has a side gig. It's not his main gig, but he likes to write songs. So he's got a band, like a garage rock band of these guys up at Princeton, and he put out an album about a month ago. So I interviewed him more about his process as a poet. And again, he's won every possible award, Pulitzer Prize, as you can imagine. And I want to get your take on this because he said something which I found fascinating. And he said, people aren't going to like when I say this, but he said, as a poet, when he writes a line, he can't write the line below it until that first line is perfect because everything depends that second line isn't going to work if it's not connected to the first one. And you would never say that as a prose writer. That's the worst thing to do. And I don't know that many songwriters have told me that, but I that really stuck with me. That seems like an agonizing way to write, but he would say, like I said, like, nope, line two can't happen until line one is flawless and it can't be touched. So I'd love to get your take on that as far as your own process as a poet. Do you notice that those Is that process more deliberate for you when it comes to writing those lines?
My I would say that I'm a little bit different in terms of I kind of have just this burst of inspiration like I would a song. It's just I write it all, and then in my editing process, I edit it as a whole uh poem. And so it's a bit different. It's like a it's a the essence of the inspiration is there, but then I kind of hone it later. Um, and the editing process takes me a long time because I'm sort of trying to, tweak the poem to feel like a. It's so interesting, to have a poet who's a songwriter, a poet by trade who's doing songwriting for fun, and then a songwriter by trade who's doing poetry for fun, which is
Right.
what I'm doing. And it's so, I didn't go to school for poetry. It's sort of just this, like, primal, like, in all my art forms, I am a very primal, creator. I'm not didn't go to school for it. I was self-taught, and so it's just sort of all feeling based. Like, how I work is all feeling based, and in some ways not academic at all, but it's an academia of the heart. So yeah, I think, I look at it, I guess maybe that's the way I write poems is influenced so much by probably how I write songs. Because that's the first form of writing that I took to. And so, yeah, it's kind of like in a song form, it comes out like how it does in song, in which it's a burst. But my editing process for poetry is a lot more intense than I'd say my songwriting process is. And songs tend to come out a lot quicker for me. They're like, my the songs that I consider my best written songs or the ones that I'm most proud of are often ones that came out very quickly, you know. Um, so
Those that happen quickly, are you less likely to edit those because they were just this burst of inspiration?
yeah, they were like this really ancient feeling, just in me that just came out, and I don't know where it came from, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of songwriters about that. There's this it's so mysterious, and why it comes so quickly and at that certain moment you don't know why, but it's like a gift when it happens that way, and it's really rare, I think, but when it does happen, it's very lovely.
And you're hands off for the most part on those.
Yeah, and there might be like a musical part that would change, or the way you sing it might change a little bit, but the songs that I can think of that came out that fast, not a lot changed, you know.
You mentioned intense, your editing you use the word intense in your editing process. I'd love to explore what that means exactly. What is that editing process like? I guess and also, is it difficult to remind yourself, "Oh, that's right, there is no music." When you're writing a poem, is it easy to forget sometimes or editing it that, "Oh, actually, I don't have to worry about music accompanying this." So what is that editing process like, intense editing process as a poet?
Um, I think I say intense because, well, one, I feel like, you know, I have 20 years of songwriting under my belt, maybe more, maybe lost count. No, it's about 20 years. And I just it feels so natural and I understand it so deeply. And poetry is still this thing that's mysterious to me. I'm still learning, and I still feel like it's something I really have to, like, think about in a way and use a different part of my brain almost. And so I've just, like, really, honed in on that editing process because, um, I'm still, like, in a way, like, just kind of learning this craft. But I think that it's exciting to me, and I think I think back to my, like, early songwriting, days, and I would just record a record, and this is the record, and I didn't know if it was good or bad. I was just like, I needed to do it, and that's how I feel about poems and paintings and all that, and it's just, you know, it's just this human need that I have to create, uh, so
Now I'm going to quote you from 2018. You called yourself an attempted novelist. You said so back then you were writing novels. Said you'd gotten the furthest you've gotten is 60 pages. So that's what it says here back in 2018. And
yeah.
you said, I think the furthest I've ever gotten is maybe 60 pages. I usually become disenchanted by then. So I think I finally realized that I like writing short stories better in the form of songs. So any chance of going back to the novel, or is that a
I
not going to happen?
am I'm still working on, I'm actually it's hilarious that that's the quote because I'm currently working on my first long form, which will be a short story collection. But it won't I'm not gonna tackle a novel, a long form novel. Um, but I would love I mean, we'll see. I'm working on it. Uh, we'll see if it's good enough. We'll see if my literary agent wants to shop it, all that stuff. But yeah, I love to write, and the challenge of writing long form has been really exciting. But um, it's been a long time dream since I was a kid to write something long form. So
Here's my take as an amateur therapist, in other words, not a therapist at all, is that I see is that poems give you a chance to say things you couldn't in a song because you're not encumbered by the limitations of music. Short stories then probably give you a way to say things that you can't say in poetry because they're practically longer. So is that why that happened? I'm curious as to why that's the next stage.
it's kind of a crazy journey that this long form has idea has been. I set out to write a memoir. I actually wrote an entire memoir. It's like 100,000 words, and I realized that I'm not at a point in my life where I want to release a memoir. I'm too young, in my opinion. No shade to anybody who releases them at this age. I just don't personally want to go into that section of my life, when everyone's still when the stories are so close, you know? I would like to release one maybe when I'm older, um, and I have one, ready to, at least be edited and all that, but so I kind of then was like, "Well, I really want to explore these characters in the desert inspired by my upbringing. But I don't want them to be attached to real people or them to be real people." So then they developed each of these characters developed into a fictional character that's nothing like people from my childhood. And obviously there's similarities because of my life, but they're it's part of my life. But so it's sort of morphed into fiction, and that's what I've just committed to, because I basically turned in a memoir, was ready to shop it, and then got cold feet.
I think I remember last time we talked feeling very, very inadequate about my own creations because listening to you, I'm just overwhelmingly impressed by all of these outlets. This is all coming back to me, feeling like, wow, I need to be doing a lot more than I am.
No,
Um,
no, I think it's actually called, anxiety or, like, an illness, or I think I may have, like, an illness.
s- so I wanted to ask you one thing about the ritual, a couple things about the ritual. Um, Is there a favorite chair? Is there a favorite room that you'd like to write in? How important is that to you?
Place is very important to me. I have a very difficult time writing, songs in my own house. So, I typically write I love, a retreat, like a writing retreat, like, that is, like, my ideal place because it feels like I can sort of, like, compartmentalize and box up those songs, and that going somewhere feels very intentional. And I have written, in my own house, but it's it's harder to do that, but no, actually, it's funny you asked that because when I was younger and I couldn't go somewhere to write, I loved to write in bed. Like, I loved to just have my guitar and write there. It felt very comforting. So, I guess to answer your question, at a certain point, that was a place I like to write a lot. Um, and I have done that in hotel rooms a lot as well. There's, like, something very I'm gonna write until I fall asleep kind of thing is nice, or write as soon as I wake up, and yeah.
So that's interesting because you went from the most secure place, a bed where we feel comfortable, and then now you feel like you can't write in your house.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
I've never had anyone say that. Most people, the natural place is, yeah, I have that room, I have that chair, there's that sense of comfort. So why is writing in your own space so difficult? That's fascinating.
I think I thrive in uncomfortable new places. I found that, like, inspiration comes to me a lot quicker when there's a change of scenery. It's so funny, even last winter, because last year I wrote a lot more than I have this year, because 'cause I've been working on several things, but I the one day I can remember just feeling super inspired, like, I need to write a song. Um, it had snowed on my street, and just that snow, change of scenery, looking outside, feeling like I was somewhere else because of the snow, I I wrote a song, and something about just shaking up my perspective really works on me, and that also might just be a mental block, I'm not really sure, but it works, and, I can't question it too much.
Are you a pen, paper, pencil person or a computer person?
I am a I have I only use green books that I write in with a very certain yeah. I have a stack of you can even they're hilariously right here for you to see. The world can't see them because 'cause we're on a podcast,
That's okay.
but
Amazing. Those
but
are
I don't
different shades of green, though.
yeah, no, they could be different shades, they just have to be green.
So why is that? Oh, this is amazing.
I don't know, it's just, like, one of my weird ticks that I do. I just only buy green books, and it's just a funny, charming, like, excuse to buy a green book. I'm not sure.
Now, what about
I'm
pen or
not
pencil?
I am a pen person, the Micron pens, those, like, ballpoint.
Yes, I think I have something similar to that. This is an Energel. Um, but yeah,
The gray ones, the, like, gray Micron pens, I love those. Um,
that color, what's the color of ink?
Black, just
Okay,
just
gotta be
black,
black.
but yeah, yeah, I don't like blue ink, I don't it has to be, like, a Micron black pen. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I would prefer that. And then if I don't have that handy, I'm not opposed to, like, notes in your phone. Um, I'd prefer not to, like, stay there, but, I do use it just to, like, jot down things.
And is your phone just filled with is the Notes app voice memo just filled with ideas?
Yeah, it's poorly organized at the moment, but I would like to get better at archiving them.
Well, if it's any consolation, most songwriters tell me they don't organize them at all. There's no organization. So you make it sound like there is normally organization to them.
There is sporadic sections that are organized, and then sporadic sections that aren't.
Do
You
you
could
ever
tell where I,
go
like, stopped organizing
how are
after
they
you
organized? What's the organization? What's the method?
I just name them, like, make something very clear, you know, if it's not finished or if it's just an idea, I'll put idea and open tuning or, like, like, stuff like that. Just try and make it sort of yeah, titled in a way that makes it easy to reference it. if I'm looking for, like, songs. 'Cause I write so I've written so much that there are there's a big well of songs in which I didn't know I'd written. So I need to, like, reference the times, that have I have written, um, but but yeah.
So, do you yeah, do you really go back to those a lot? I have all these notes too, but I rarely go back to them. I have ideas that I will, but I don't as much as I probably should, but it sounds like you go back to those a lot.
I do, especially when compiling, like, demos for a record, because a lot of times in my career, my life, the song that I hate or that I don't think is good enough or don't like for whatever reason ends up being a song that everyone else does like.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't always trust myself. I think, you know, I I usually know, but there's a time or two where, like, somebody will be like, "No, you should record that." For instance, I have this song, "May Your Kindness Remain," which you know, I almost didn't record, and then I played it for an old keyboard player, and he was like, "Are you should absolutely record that song," and then it ended up being, like, the title track of the record and all this stuff, so I just don't I think it's good for me to, not always, you know, have complete or just to, like, be able to, like, reference those because I will throw away songs, and I have, and, I'm not always the best I don't always have the best discernment, I think, and I think people in general with their own voice don't always have the best discernment, um, with what's good or not because we're our own worst enemies, so.
I had a songwriter say to me once that they're the best editor when they are fatigued, because when you're fatigued, you're less likely to fight with yourself.
Mm, I love that. I actually feel like that about singing sometimes. I feel like I'm a better singer when I, like, am hungover or something.
So I'm glad you brought that up because it's funny, I haven't talked about this in a while, but some songwriters tell me they write that when they're hungover, that's their ideal state. But I think for that reason, because you don't I don't know the answer to this. Part of it is I think you don't wanna fight with yourself, but there's something about being hungover where you're just all you feel is your head. You're not aware of anything else around. But I do hear that a lot, that being hungover for some people, to me, I can't imagine it. Like, I'm just in pain. But for some songwriters, that's a very prolific place to write from.
Wow. I don't know if I like to write when I'm hungover. That sounds hard. Um Um, I think for me, my, like, ideal state for songwriting is, like, when I'm not excuse me, it's not like it's like when I'm content,
Hmm.
not happy, not super depressed, but just, like actually, it's kind of it's not when I'm content. It's, like, a couple weeks after something really terrible has happened, and I processed it, but I'm not quite away from it yet. But I can't write when I'm, like, really depressed. That's really hard. And I can't write when I'm, like, elated. It's gotta be this, like, you're sort of in between 2 worlds. Um, but as far as, like, sleep and stuff, I'd prefer to not be hungover. I have written, like, with a cold before, and that's always fun because you sing lower and you're not as inclined to, like, jump around, and you can make something kinda cool and a little bit lazier, which is nice.
It reminds me a little bit of when songwriters tell me that if one of the ways to get out of writer's block is to go to another instrument. And especially, and I've heard this a few times, it's an instrument that they're just learning to play and they're not very good at. And so the cold thing reminds me of that because it gets you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. I totally agree with the writing on a different instrument. I think that's really exciting. I've started doing piano songs because of that very thing. I loved and again, it's the mystery thing. It all comes back to that. I think the best stuff can derive from mystery, from not knowing, from the it's like that Picasso quote, that, very famous Picasso quote where "It took me 4 years." I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but "It took me 4 years to paint like the masters and a lifetime to paint like a child." And I feel that in my work, the best kind of stuff comes from when you're not being too heady, it's a soul thing. It's like your soul shines a lot more when you're not trying to be, like, overly complicated, you know, with getting there to arriving to a song.
My favorite quote that I always give songwriters is the Agatha Christie said, "The best time to write a book is when you're doing the dishes." And so are you the number of writers who get ideas, those eureka moments when they are engaged in monotonous activities. I've heard gardening, cleaning, vacuuming, doing the laundry,
Walking.
walking. So does that happen a lot? Sounds like it does.
Walking is, like, my absolute, like, idea place. Walking alone in the woods or wherever without a device, without anything, just walking is a bed of inspiration for me. So many ideas come from walks.
Does it matter where you're walking? Does it matter if it's like an urban environment versus the woods?
I I would say I prefer the woods. I think, like, urban environments are fine, but they can be really distracting. There's, like, horns and crazy things happening all around you. I think, uh, it's a very clean palette, when you're just walking in nature.
Let's end with this. I'm looking at again. Last time we talked 7 years ago, we talked about who we are reading, and you had said, as you and I talked about earlier, you just finished *The Lost City, the Monkey God*, which is an amazing book.
Mhm.
You talked about Steinbeck, and you said Flannery O'Connor and Tim Robbins. So I'd love to know now, 7 years later, who
Oh,
your literary influences are.
my literary influences. Well, I really love, um I've been reading a lot of Louise Gluck this year. She's one of my favorite poets.
Yep.
And, Jack Gilbert as far as the poetry realm. And then, I just love Ocean Vuong's books. I've read a couple of his I'm actually, like, looking over at my, bookshelf of what I've read this year. Um, I think Sheila Heti is amazing. I love her work. Um, and there's also this kind of wild, like, um I guess I call it science fiction, but it sort of lives in a strange world of unknown. But this book called "I Who Have Never Known Men." Have you seen this on the shelves? Oh, it's a wild book. It's very simply written, but it's just a very interesting book. I've read in the memoir realm a lot of Mary Karr this year. I think she's a beautiful writer. And, Hernan Diaz. Um, yeah, I've actually I'm my Goodreads, goal this year was really high, so I've read a lot of books this year. I really hope I get to the end, but we'll see. Anyway,
All right. So, one follow up to that. If you're reading a book and you're just not feeling it, are you able to quit it or do you need to see it through and finish it?
I have to see it through, unfortunately.
So, I used to be the
I am a
same way.
taskmaster, I have to finish it.
I figured you were. I know. I'd have predicted that answer. I used to be the same way. But once I realized that, it's so funny. I was talking to someone recently, another songwriter, and because I wanted to be able to tell people that I read a book, but I felt like if I quit it, I couldn't tell people I read it.
Absolutely, I think that's completely fair.
But once I realized that I could quit these things, It was very liberating because I realized I could read another book instead, but I love the fact that you have to finish it through.
I do. I mean, it it has happened, but if it's bad enough, I wouldn't even wanna tell people that I read it. So, that's happened maybe a couple times, like, in the past couple years, where but genuinely, like, it has to be really bad for me to, like, to not finish it, 'cause I can't stand I also it's like you put if you read 100 pages, you've gotten that far, like, come on. You at least need to, like, see what the author's trying to do. Give him a chance, because there's books that turn around at page 100, and you all of a sudden, you're like, "This is the best book ever," you know?
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug. My book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.